I never imagined that trusting my own family would lead me to this moment. But here I am, 3 years later, finally understanding that sometimes the people closest to us are the ones who hurt us most deeply. It all started when my daughter Sophia married Daniel. He seemed perfect, attentive, polite, always ready to help. After my husband passed away 5 years ago, I lived alone in the house we built together over 40 years of marriage. It's a large property, 3 stories, with a garden my husband cultivated with so much love. The house holds not just memories, but also everything we accumulated throughout our lives. Daniel was quick to offer help. Mom, he'd say, he called me Mom from the beginning, let me fix that loose tile for you. Let me check the electrical panel. You shouldn't worry about these things. My daughter beamed with pride at her helpful husband. And I, lonely and missing having someone to care for the house, gratefully accepted. 6 months after the wedding, Daniel suggested something that seemed sensible. Mom, what if I had a copy of your house key? That way, if there's an emergency, I can come help immediately. You know, Sophia worries about you living alone. It made sense. I was 68 years old, living by myself in a big house. What enter novam interrotoro todo Ingolsteaser. I thought my son-in-law was honest until the locksmith said, Ma'am, there's another copy of this key at. My heart stopped. For 3 years, I trusted this man like a son. He had access to my house, my safe, my entire life. I thought he was helping me, protecting me. But that sentence from the locksmith changed everything. When I discovered where that duplicate key was and what he'd been doing with it, I felt the ground open beneath my feet. My own daughter didn't believe me. My friends said I was being paranoid, but I knew something was wrong. The expensive trips they couldn't afford, the luxury car that appeared out of nowhere, the nervous looks when I mentioned my jewelry. And then, the day I found the empty velvet box in my safe, I understood the horrible truth. He thought I was just a naive old woman. He thought he could fool me forever. But what I didn't know was that I had been one step ahead all along. And when I revealed what I knew at that family dinner, his face went white, because my secret was much bigger than his. I never imagined that trusting my own family would lead me to this moment. But here I am, 3 years later, finally understanding that sometimes the people closest to us are the ones who hurt us most deeply. It all started when my daughter Sophia married Daniel. He seemed perfect, attentive, polite, always ready to help. After my husband passed away 5 years ago, I lived alone in the house we built together over 40 years of marriage. It's a large property, 3 stories, with a garden my husband cultivated with so much love. The house holds not just memories, but also everything we accumulated throughout our lives. Daniel was quick to offer help. Mom, he'd say, he called me Mom from the beginning, let me fix that loose tile for you. Let me check the electrical panel. You shouldn't worry about these things. My daughter beamed with pride at her helpful husband. And I, lonely and missing having someone to care for the house, gratefully accepted. 6 months after the wedding, Daniel suggested something that seemed sensible. Mom, what if I had a copy of your house key? That way, if there's an emergency, I can come help immediately. You know, Sophia worries about you living alone. It made sense. I was 68 years old, living by myself in a big house. What if I fell? What if something happened? Having someone with a key seemed like a good idea. So I agreed and gave him a copy. At first, everything was wonderful. Daniel would come by on weekends to help with small repairs. He mowed the lawn, fixed leaky faucets, changed light bulbs I couldn't reach. My daughter was so happy to see us getting along. You're so lucky to have him, Mom, she'd say. And I believed it. But then small things started happening. Things I couldn't quite explain. I'd leave my reading glasses on the kitchen table and find them in the living room. I'd place my mail in one spot and discover it somewhere else. At first, I blamed my age. I'm getting forgetful, I'd tell myself. But deep down, something didn't feel right. Then I started noticing Daniel's lifestyle changing. He and Sophia lived in a modest apartment, and both had regular jobs. She was a teacher. He worked in sales. They made decent money, but nothing extravagant. Yet suddenly, they were taking expensive vacations. First it was a trip to Europe, then a Caribbean cruise. My daughter posted photos on social media, all smiles and 5-star hotels. How can you afford all this? I asked Sophia one day. She laughed. Daniel got some great bonuses at work. He's been doing really well. You know how good he is at sales. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But the trips kept happening. And then came the car. A brand new luxury sedan appeared in their driveway. When I asked about it, Daniel just smiled and said, "I've been saving up, Mom. Working hard pays off." But my instincts were screaming that something was wrong. The first real alarm bell rang about 8 months ago. I went to my safe to get some documents. I keep the safe in my bedroom closet. It's where my husband and I always stored important papers, some cash for emergencies, and my jewelry collection. My husband had given me beautiful pieces over the years. Not extremely valuable, but precious to me. Each necklace, each ring held a memory. I opened the safe and noticed immediately that things looked disturbed. The jewelry boxes weren't stacked the way I always left them. My heart started pounding. I opened one of the velvet boxes where I kept a gold bracelet my husband gave me on our 20th anniversary. The box was empty. My hands trembled as I went through the other boxes. A pearl necklace gone. Diamond earrings gone. 3 rings gone. I felt sick. The jewelry wasn't worth a fortune, maybe $15,000 or $20,000 total, but it was irreplaceable to me. I sat on my bedroom floor and cried. Who had done this? Had someone broken in? But there were no signs of forced entry. The safe hadn't been damaged. Whoever took my jewelry had known the combination. And only 3 people knew that combination. Me, my daughter, and Daniel. I called Sophia immediately, my voice shaking. Honey, some of my jewelry is missing from the safe. There was a pause. What? Are you sure you didn't move it somewhere else? I'm certain. Someone took it. Another pause. Then, Mom, have you been forgetting things lately? Maybe you put it somewhere and don't remember. Her words stung like a slap. I'm not senile, Sophia. My jewelry was stolen. She sighed. Okay. Let me talk to Daniel. Maybe we should call the police. But the police never got called. Instead, Daniel came over that evening, all concern and sympathy. Mom, I'm so sorry this happened. Let me install better locks for you. Maybe get a security system. You can't be too careful these days. He was so convincing, so caring. For a moment, I doubted myself. But then I saw him glance at the safe, and something in his eyes made my blood run cold. It wasn't concern. It was calculation. That night, I lay awake thinking. Daniel had a key to my house. He knew the safe combination because I'd given it to Sophia years ago, and she must have shared it with him. He could come and go as he pleased. And suddenly their expensive lifestyle made horrible sense. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, give it a thumbs up, and comment what you would do in this situation. But I had no proof. If I accused him without evidence, I'd destroy my relationship with my daughter. Sophia was clearly blind to what her husband was doing. She'd defend him, and I'd be the paranoid old woman who couldn't accept her daughter's happiness. So I started watching, waiting, gathering information. I began keeping a detailed log of every time Daniel visited, every time something seemed out of place. I took photos of my safe contents, documenting exactly what was still there. I checked my bank statements more carefully, and that's when I found another disturbing pattern. Small amounts of money had been disappearing from my checking account. Nothing huge, $200 here, $300 there. Amounts small enough that I might not notice, but over the course of a year, it added up to thousands. The withdrawals had been made from ATMs across town, always when I wasn't home. But I didn't have an ATM card. I'd never liked them, preferred to go to the bank in person. My card had expired years ago, and I never renewed it. Yet someone was using a card linked to my account. I went to the bank, my stomach churning with anxiety. The manager, a kind woman named Patricia who'd known me for years, pulled up my account information. I see here that a second card was issued on your account about 2.5 years ago, she said, frowning at her computer screen. Did you request that? No, I never requested a second card. Patricia's expression grew serious. Let me pull up the request form. She clicked through several screens, then turned the monitor toward me. Is this your signature? I stared at the form. My name was signed at the bottom, but the handwriting wasn't quite right. Someone had forged my signature. And the date on the form? 3 months after Daniel got his copy of my house key. This isn't my signature, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Patricia's face filled with concern. Ma'am, this is fraud. We need to file a police report immediately and cancel this card. Wait, I said. My mind was racing. Can you tell me where the withdrawals have been made? She pulled up the transaction history. Almost all the ATM locations were near Daniel's workplace or close to his apartment. The pattern was undeniable. Not yet, I told Patricia. Don't cancel the card yet. I need to handle this carefully. She looked uncertain but agreed. Please, be careful. And let me know when you're ready to proceed with the fraud claim. I left the bank feeling like I was drowning in betrayal. My son-in-law had forged my signature, stolen my ATM card, and had been slowly draining my bank account. Combined with the jewelry theft, he'd probably taken $25,000 or $30,000 from me over the past 2 years. And my daughter had no idea. Or did she? That question haunted me. Was Sophia involved? Did she know what her husband was doing? The thought that my own daughter might be stealing from me was almost too painful to bear. I decided to test her. The next time we had lunch together, I mentioned casually, I'm thinking of updating my will, making sure everything is in order. Sophia's reaction told me everything I needed to know. She smiled, completely relaxed. That's a good idea, Mom. It's important to have these things organized. She showed no guilt, no nervousness. My daughter wasn't involved. She was as much a victim of Daniel's deception as I was. That realization filled me with relief and rage in equal measure. Relief that my daughter was innocent. Rage that this man was not only stealing from me but was lying to my daughter every single day. Leave me in the comments. Have you been through something similar? I knew I had to be smart about this. If I confronted Daniel directly, he'd deny everything. He'd convince Sophia I was confused, maybe even suggest I was developing dementia. I needed concrete proof that was so undeniable, so overwhelming, that even he couldn't talk his way out of it. That's when I thought about the key. The original copy I'd given Daniel was the only copy he'd made. What if he'd duplicated it again? What if he'd given copies to other people? The thought made my skin crawl. I decided to do something that might seem paranoid, but I had to know. I called a locksmith, not my usual one, but a new company I found online. I wanted someone who didn't know me, someone who'd be honest. When the locksmith arrived, a young man with a friendly face, I told him I wanted to change all my locks. I've had some security concerns, I explained. Smart decision, he said, examining my front door lock. Then he paused, looking at the lock more closely. This is interesting. What is it? This lock has been picked recently. See these small scratches? That's typical of someone using lockpicks or trying different keys. My heart raced. Are you sure? Pretty sure. And he pulled out the lock cylinder to examine it. Yeah, this lock has definitely been manipulated. I'd recommend changing not just the locks but upgrading to a higher security system. Can you tell when this happened? He shrugged. These scratches look relatively fresh. Within the past few months, I'd say. So Daniel wasn't just using the key I'd given him. He'd been practicing picking my locks or making additional copies. The violation felt even deeper. Before you change the locks, I said, an idea forming. I need you to do something for me. It might sound strange, but bear with me. I explained what I wanted. The locksmith looked puzzled but agreed. I need to know how many copies of my house key exist. Is there any way to track that? He thought for a moment. Well, if the copies were made at local locksmiths or hardware stores, I might be able to check. We have a network, and for security purposes, some places keep records of key duplications, especially for unusual keys. Yours is a pretty specific high-security key. Let me make some calls. It took him 3 days, but he called me back with information that made my blood boil. Ma'am, I found records of your key being copied at 4 different locations over the past 2 years. The name on the orders was Daniel Martinez. 4 copies. 4. What did he need with 4 copies of my house key? There's more, the locksmith continued. One of those copies was made just last month at a hardware store on Maple Street. The clerk there remembered the transaction because the customer asked specifically about safe keys too. He wanted to know if they could duplicate safe keys. I felt my face burning with shame and rage. Daniel wasn't just stealing from me now, he was planning to continue. Or maybe he was teaching someone else how to rob me too. Thank you, I told the locksmith, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. Please change all my locks today, and I'll take you up on that security system recommendation. After the locks were changed, I sat in my living room, thinking about my next move. I had evidence now. Bank records, the locksmith's report, my jewelry inventory showing what was missing. But I wanted more. I wanted Daniel to confess. I wanted him to face what he'd done with nowhere to hide. And I wanted my daughter to understand who she'd married. That's when I devised my plan. It was risky, maybe even a bit theatrical, but it felt right. I would set a trap, one that Daniel couldn't resist, and I'd make sure there were witnesses to his downfall. I called Sophia and suggested a family dinner at my house. I have something important to discuss with both of you, I said, about my estate planning. I could practically hear Daniel's ears perk up through the phone. Sophia agreed happily, unaware of what was coming. Then I made 3 more calls. First, to Patricia at the bank, asking her to prepare a complete statement of all the fraudulent transactions. Second, to my lawyer, asking him to attend the dinner. And third, to my neighbor Margaret, a retired police officer, asking her to come as well. I'm not sure what you're planning, Margaret said, but if you need backup, I'm there. Subscribe and hit the bell icon for more stories like this. The week leading up to the dinner was torture. I had to pretend everything was normal when Daniel came by to check on me. He still had his old key and didn't know I'd changed the locks, so when he tried to use it one afternoon while I was out, the new security system I'd installed recorded him repeatedly trying to get in, looking frustrated and confused. The video footage was damning. It showed Daniel not just trying his key, but actually attempting to pick the lock when it didn't work. He spent 20 minutes at my door before finally giving up and leaving. I watched the footage 3 times, each viewing making me angrier. How could I have been so blind? How had I trusted this man with access to my home, my finances, my life? The night of the dinner arrived. I'd prepared a simple meal, nothing fancy, because this wasn't about the food. This was about justice. Sophia arrived first, beautiful and smiling, giving me a big hug. I'm excited to hear about your estate plans, Mom. It's so responsible of you to get everything organized. My heart ached. She had no idea her world was about to shatter. Daniel came in behind her, his charming smile in place. Mom, something smells delicious. He leaned in to kiss my cheek and I had to force myself not to pull away. Then my lawyer arrived, a distinguished man in his 60s named Robert, followed by Margaret. Daniel's smile faltered slightly when he saw them. Mom, I didn't know this was going to be such a formal dinner, Sophia said, looking confused. Please, everyone sit down, I said, my voice calm despite my racing heart. Let's eat first, then we'll talk. Dinner was awkward. Daniel kept glancing at Robert and Margaret, clearly nervous. Sophia chattered about her students, trying to fill the uncomfortable silence. I barely tasted my food. Finally, when the plates were cleared, I stood up. Thank you all for coming. I asked you here tonight because I need to address something very serious. Sophia looked worried. Mom, are you okay? Are you sick? I'm fine, honey, but I've discovered something that affects all of us, and I need to handle it properly. I looked directly at Daniel. His face had gone pale. 3 years ago, I gave you a key to my house because I trusted you. I thought you were a good man, a good husband to my daughter. Mom, he started, but I held up my hand. Let me finish. Over the past 2 years, I've had jewelry stolen from my safe. Money has disappeared from my bank account. I've felt violated in my own home, wondering who was doing this to me. Sophia gasped. What? Mom, why didn't you tell me? Because I needed to be sure. And now I am. I turned to Robert. Would you please present the evidence? My lawyer opened his briefcase and pulled out several folders. These are bank statements showing unauthorized ATM withdrawals from your mother's account, totaling approximately $18,000 over the past 2 years. The withdrawals were made using a card that was fraudulently obtained in your mother's name. He slid photos across the table, ATM camera images showing Daniel using the card. Sophia's face went white. Daniel? What? What is this? That's not all, I continued, my voice stronger now. The locksmith found that you made 4 duplicate copies of my house key without my knowledge. 4 copies. One was made just last month. I pulled out the security camera footage on my tablet, showing him trying to break into my house after I changed the locks. This was recorded 5 days ago. Daniel stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. This is ridiculous. You're a paranoid old woman who's losing her mind. Sophia, your mother is clearly confused. Sit down, Margaret said firmly, her police officer voice cutting through the room. I've reviewed all this evidence, and it's pretty clear what's been going on. Give it a thumbs up if you think I did the right thing. Mom, I don't understand, Sophia said, tears streaming down her face. Daniel, tell me this isn't true. Please tell me you didn't do this. Daniel's mask was cracking. Baby, she's exaggerating. I borrowed a little money. That's all. She has plenty you stole from my mother. Sophia's voice was anguished. How could you? How could you steal from her? Don't be naive, Daniel snapped, his true nature finally showing. She's living alone in this huge house with all her money and jewelry. What's she going to do with it? At least we're putting it to use. Those vacations? That car? That was all for us, baby. For our future. The room fell silent. I felt a lump tightening in my throat, but I refused to cry. Not now. Not in front of him. You thought I wouldn't notice, I said quietly. You thought I was just a foolish old woman you could steal from forever. Yeah, well, you didn't notice for 2 years. Daniel shot back, his voice cruel now. You're too old to manage all this by yourself anyway. You should be grateful I'm here to help. Sophia was sobbing now. I can't believe this. I can't believe I married you. Oh, grow up, Daniel said dismissively. Your mom is loaded. She doesn't need all this money. We're her family. This is all going to be ours eventually anyway. Not anymore. It isn't, I said. Robert, please continue. My lawyer pulled out another document. This is a police report being filed for fraud, forgery, and theft. The evidence is substantial. Daniel, you're looking at serious criminal charges. Daniel's confidence evaporated. Wait, you can't. Sophia, tell them this is a family matter. We can work this out. Sophia looked at him with disgust. You're a thief. You stole from my mother. There's nothing to work out. And there's one more thing, I said. I've updated my will. You, Daniel, are specifically excluded from inheriting anything from my estate. And Sophia, honey, your inheritance is now held in a trust that Daniel can never access or control. This was my trump card, not just exposing him, but ensuring he'd never benefit from his crimes. Daniel's face turned red with rage. You bitter old witch. I've wasted 3 years being nice to you, fixing your house, pretending to care. Get out of my house, I said, my voice like steel. Before Margaret here calls her former colleagues to arrest you right now. Margaret stood up, her hand on her phone. I'd be happy to make that call. Daniel looked around the room, realizing he had no allies, no escape. He grabbed his jacket. This isn't over, he spat. Yes, it is, Robert said calmly. And if you come near this property again, you'll be arrested for trespassing. The locks have been changed. Your key doesn't work anymore. As Daniel stormed out, slamming the door behind him, Sophia collapsed in her chair, still crying. I went to her and held her as she sobbed. I'm so sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry. I had no idea. I should have known. I should have seen, honey. This isn't your fault. He fooled both of us. All those trips, the car, the nice restaurants. I thought he was doing so well at work. I thought we were building a good life together. But it was all stolen. From you. My heart broke for her. She was a victim too, in her own way. Over the next few weeks, the full extent of Daniel's betrayal came to light. The police investigation revealed he'd been planning to take much more. He'd been researching how to forge power of attorney documents. He'd even contacted a real estate agent about selling my house, planning to convince me to move into a nursing home. The jewelry turned up at several pawn shops across the city. I got some of it back, though a few pieces were gone forever. The money he'd stolen was harder to recover, but the bank was cooperating with the fraud investigation. Daniel was arrested and charged with multiple felonies. Sophia filed for divorce immediately. It was a painful time for her, dealing with the betrayal and the embarrassment. But she was strong, and I was there for her every step of the way. Do you think I overreacted? Comment below. At the trial 6 months later, I gave my testimony clearly and firmly. I watched as Daniel's lawyer tried to paint me as a confused elderly woman, but the evidence was overwhelming. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours before finding him guilty. When the judge sentenced him to 4 years in prison, I felt no joy, just a deep sadness that someone could be so cruel, so calculating. But I also felt vindicated. Justice had been served. After the trial, Sophia and I sat in my living room, the same room where I'd exposed Daniel's crimes. She looked exhausted but relieved. "I keep thinking about all the signs I missed," she said. "The way he was always asking about your finances, offering to help you manage your money. How he'd get angry if you mentioned changing your will. He was very good at manipulation," I said gently. "That's not your fault. I invited a thief into your life, Mom. Into your home. No, you married someone who turned out to be different than who he pretended to be. There's a difference." We sat in silence for a moment. Then Sophia asked, "How did you stay so calm through all of it? How did you plan everything so carefully?" I smiled. "Because I learned a long time ago that anger without strategy is just noise. I needed to be smart, not just angry. I needed evidence, not just accusations." "You were brilliant," she said, squeezing my hand. "I'm so proud of you for standing up for yourself. And I'm proud of you for standing with me, even though it meant losing your marriage." "He wasn't worth keeping," she said firmly. "You taught me that my dignity and self-respect are more valuable than any relationship." Those words meant everything to me. In the months that followed, Sophia moved back in with me for a while as she rebuilt her life. It was nice having her there, like when she was young. We'd have dinner together, watch old movies, talk late into the night. My house felt safe again. The new security system gave me peace of mind, and I'd learned to trust my instincts. When something feels wrong, it usually is. I also learned that age doesn't make you weak or foolish. If anything, my years of experience had given me the patience and wisdom to handle the situation correctly. A younger version of me might have confronted Daniel immediately, without evidence, and he would have talked his way out of it. But I'd learned to watch, wait, and strike at the right moment. One afternoon, I was working in my garden, the garden my husband had loved so much, when my neighbor Margaret came over with tea. "I heard Daniel appealed his sentence," she said, settling into a patio chair. "He did." "It was denied," I replied, pulling weeds from around the roses. "Good. That man deserves every day of his sentence." She paused. "You know, I've seen a lot of crimes in my career, but what he did to you was particularly cruel. Taking advantage of your trust, your loneliness." "I wasn't lonely," I corrected gently. "I was alone. There's a difference. Loneliness is a state of mind. I was content with my own company." He mistook that contentment for vulnerability. Margaret smiled. "That's beautifully put, and very true. The worst part," I continued, "was knowing he never really cared about me. Every kind word, every helpful gesture, it was all calculation. That's what hurt most. Not the stolen money or jewelry, but the betrayal of affection." "Do you regret giving him that first key?" I considered the question carefully. "No. If I hadn't, he would have found another way, and I might not have discovered his crimes until much more damage was done. Sometimes our mistakes lead us to important truths." That evening, I updated my journals, something I'd been keeping throughout the whole ordeal. I wrote about the trial, about Daniel's sentencing, about Sophia's healing process. And I wrote about the lessons I'd learned. Never underestimate yourself, no matter your age. Never ignore your instincts when something feels wrong. Never let someone make you doubt your own perceptions. And never, ever give someone unlimited access to your life without maintaining appropriate boundaries. Trust is earned, not given freely. And when that trust is betrayed, you have every right to protect yourself and seek justice. I thought about all the older women who might be going through similar situations, being taken advantage of by family members, caregivers, or people they trust. I wanted them to know that they're not powerless. That age brings wisdom, and that wisdom can be a formidable weapon against those who would exploit us. A few weeks later, I received a letter from Daniel. It was sent from prison, and part of me didn't want to open it, but curiosity won out. The letter was full of self-pity and manipulation. He claimed he was sorry, that he'd made mistakes, that he'd been under financial pressure. He asked me to write to the parole board on his behalf when the time came. He even had the audacity to suggest that if I helped him, he'd pay me back everything he stole. I read it once, then put it in the shredder. Some people never learn. Some people never take responsibility for their actions. Daniel was clearly one of them. He still saw me as someone he could manipulate, someone who'd feel sorry for him and rescue him from the consequences of his own choices. But I was done being anyone's victim or savior. I'd done what I needed to do. Justice had been served. Now it was time to move forward. Sophia was doing better. She'd found a new apartment, started seeing a therapist to process the betrayal, and was throwing herself into her teaching career. She came to visit me every Sunday for dinner, and we'd grown closer than ever. I think this experience, as horrible as it was, taught me something important. She said one evening, I was so desperate to have the perfect marriage, the perfect life, that I ignored warning signs. I didn't want to see the truth. We often don't see what we don't want to see, I agreed. But you saw it. Even when everyone told you were wrong, you trusted yourself. That's something that comes with age, honey. You learn that your own perception matters more than what others think. You learn to trust that inner voice. She smiled. I'm learning that now. The hard way. But I'm learning. As I sit here now, 2 years after that dramatic dinner where I exposed Daniel's crimes, I feel at peace. My house is secure, my finances are protected, and my relationship with my daughter is stronger than ever. I still live alone, but I'm more careful now about who I let into my life and how much access I give them. I've made new friends through a local senior center, and I volunteer at the library twice a week. My life is full and meaningful. The stolen jewelry that was recovered sits in a safety deposit box at the bank now, not in my home safe. I wear my favorite pieces occasionally, but mostly I keep them secure. They're just objects after all. Beautiful objects with sentimental value, but in the end, just things. What matters more is the lesson I learned about my own strength. I discovered that I could face betrayal and come out stronger. That I could fight back smartly and win. That age hadn't diminished my capabilities or my worth. I think about my husband sometimes, wishing he were here to see how I handled this situation. I think he'd be proud. He always said I was stronger than I gave myself credit for. He was right. To anyone reading this who's been taken advantage of, who's been made to feel foolish or weak because of their age, you're neither. You have decades of experience, wisdom, and strength. Use them. Trust your instincts. Document everything. Get help from professionals when you need it. And don't let anyone make you doubt yourself. Dignity is not negotiable. Respect must be demanded, not begged for. And justice, when pursued with intelligence and patience, can be achieved. My story isn't unique. Financial abuse of the elderly is far more common than people realize. Family members, caregivers, and trusted individuals exploit vulnerable older adults every day. But we are not as vulnerable as they think. We are not as helpless as they assume. We have voices, we have rights, we have resources, and we have the wisdom that comes from living long enough to recognize manipulation when we see it. I chose to fight back, and I won, not just in court, but in reclaiming my sense of security and self-respect. That victory is worth more than all the money Daniel stole. Looking back, I can see how every small decision I made led to that final confrontation. Trusting my instincts when things felt wrong. Documenting evidence instead of immediately confronting him. Building a case carefully and methodically. Surrounding myself with professionals who could help. And timing the revelation perfectly so there was no room for him to escape or manipulate the situation. It was like a chess game, and I played it better than he ever expected. He underestimated me because of my age. That was his biggest mistake. Now, when I lock my door at night, I feel safe. When I check my bank statements, I feel secure. When I look at my daughter rebuilding her life with strength and dignity, I feel proud. Daniel thought he could steal my peace along with my money. He thought he could make me feel violated and afraid in my own home. But in the end, I took back everything he tried to take from me. Not just the money and jewelry, but my sense of control, my confidence, and my faith in my own judgment. That's the real victory. Not the prison sentence or the recovered assets, but the knowledge that I stood up for myself and won. And if I can do it, at 68 years old, after trusting the wrong person and being betrayed by someone I treated like family, then anyone can do it. Age is not weakness. Trust is not foolishness. And seeking justice is not revenge, it's self-respect. I hope my story inspires others to stand up for themselves, no matter their age or circumstances. You are never too old to fight for what's right. You are never too trusting to recognize betrayal. And you are never too kind to demand justice. The truth always comes to light. Sometimes it needs a little help getting there, but if you're patient and strategic, if you trust yourself and refuse to be dismissed, the truth will emerge. And when it does, when justice is finally served, the feeling of vindication is sweeter than any revenge could ever be. Because in the end, I didn't just punish Daniel for his crimes. I proved to myself, to my daughter, and to everyone who might have doubted me that I was strong, capable, and deserving of respect. That's the lesson I want to leave with you. Never let anyone make you feel less than you are. Never accept disrespect or betrayal as inevitable. And never, ever underestimate your own power to change your situation. You're stronger than you think, wiser than you know, and more capable than anyone who would try to take advantage of you could ever imagine. Stand tall, trust yourself, and when necessary, fight back with everything you have. Because you deserve dignity, respect, and justice. Always. Because you deserve dignity, respect, and justice. Always. 3 months after Daniel's sentencing, something unexpected happened that would prove just how deep his deception had run. I received a call from a woman I didn't know. Her name was Patricia Collins, and she sounded nervous on the phone. "I'm sorry to bother you," she said, "but I saw the news coverage of Daniel Martinez's trial. I need to talk to you about him. Can we meet somewhere?" My first instinct was caution. I'd been through enough, but something in her voice made me agree. We met at a coffee shop near my house, and when I saw her, I understood why she'd seemed nervous. She was in her 70s, dressed simply, with worry lines etched deep around her eyes. "Thank you for meeting me," she said as we sat down. "I almost didn't call. I was so ashamed. But then I thought, if he did it to you, maybe he did it to others." My stomach dropped. "Tell me what happened." Patricia's story was heartbreakingly familiar. She'd met Daniel 3 years ago at a community center where she volunteered. He'd been charming, helpful, concerned about her living alone. Over several months, he'd gained her trust. Eventually, she'd given him a key to her house so he could help with repairs. "I started noticing small things missing," she said, her hands trembling around her coffee cup. "A silver tea set that had been my mother's. Some savings bonds. But I blamed myself. Thought I was getting forgetful." "How much did he take from you?" I asked gently. She looked down. "About $12,000 in cash and bonds. And the silver set was worth another $5,000. But when I realized what was happening and confronted him, he denied everything. Made me feel crazy. Told me I was confused, that I needed to see a doctor. I was so humiliated that I never reported it. I felt rage building inside me again. He was doing this to multiple people at the same time. I think so. After the trial coverage, I did some research. I found 2 other women in different neighborhoods who'd had similar experiences with a man matching his description, but they were too embarrassed to come forward. This revelation changed everything. Daniel wasn't just a thief who'd betrayed his family. He was a predator who specifically targeted older women, using the same playbook over and over again. "We need to report this to the prosecutor," I said immediately. "This could affect his case, maybe add charges." Patricia looked frightened. "I don't know if I can." "The shame of admitting I was fooled, the shame belongs to him, not to you," I said firmly. "And every woman who comes forward makes it harder for him to do this to someone else when he gets out." Over the next week, I worked with Patricia and tracked down the other 2 women she'd mentioned. One was named Dorothy, a widow in her 80s. The other was Helen, who was 73 and lived alone after her husband died. Their stories were virtually identical to ours: charm, helpfulness, gaining trust, getting a key, then systematic theft. Between the 4 of us, Daniel had stolen over $60,000, not counting my losses. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, give it a thumbs up, and comment what you would do in this situation. We met with the prosecutor together for women who'd been victimized by the same con artist. The prosecutor, a sharp woman in her 40s named Jennifer Woods, listened to our stories with growing anger. This changes the nature of the case significantly, she said. This isn't just a family dispute over money. This is a pattern of elder abuse and targeted fraud. We can file additional charges. But he's already been sentenced, Patricia said. We can petition the court to reconsider based on new evidence showing a pattern of criminal behavior. The judge needs to know this wasn't an isolated incident. Daniel Martinez is a serial predator. The hearing was scheduled for 6 weeks later. In that time, Jennifer worked tirelessly to build the expanded case. She found another victim, a woman named Rose, who'd given Daniel $15,000, believing it was for a real estate investment he'd promised would triple her money. 5 victims, 5 elderly women, over $80,000 stolen through manipulation and betrayal. When the day of the hearing arrived, we all attended. Daniel was brought in wearing prison orange, and the look on his face when he saw all of us sitting together in the courtroom was priceless. His eyes went wide with panic. The judge, an older man named Harrison, listened as each woman gave her testimony. Patricia spoke about the missing silver tea set. Dorothy described how Daniel had convinced her to give him cash for emergency repairs that never happened. Helen told how he'd taken jewelry she'd planned to leave to her grandchildren. When it was my turn to speak again, I looked directly at Daniel. Your Honor, when I exposed this man's crimes against me, I thought I was dealing with an isolated incident of family betrayal. Now I know the truth. He's a predator who systematically targets vulnerable older women. He studies us, learns our weaknesses, then exploits us methodically. Daniel's lawyer tried to argue that these were separate incidents, that some might be misunderstandings, but the pattern was too clear. Same age group, same methods, same lies, same betrayals. Judge Harrison's face was stern as he delivered his ruling. Mr. Martinez, the evidence presented today shows that your crimes against your mother-in-law were not an aberration but part of a calculated pattern of elder abuse. You targeted vulnerable members of our community and exploited their trust for personal gain. This court takes such predatory behavior extremely seriously. He paused, looking down at Daniel with disgust. Your original sentence of 4 years is hereby modified. You are sentenced to 8 years in prison, with restitution to be paid to all victims. Additionally, upon release, you will be subject to probation restrictions that prohibit you from working with or having unsupervised contact with anyone over the age of 65. Daniel's face crumbled. Your Honor, please, you preyed on women who reminded you of someone's grandmother, the judge continued. You stole not just their money but their sense of safety and trust. You deserve no leniency. As they led Daniel away, he shot me a look of pure hatred, but I felt no fear, only satisfaction that justice had been truly served. After the hearing, the 5 of us went to lunch together. What had started as separate tragedies had become a bond. We'd all been victimized by the same man, and now we'd all seen him held accountable. I can't believe he doubled his sentence, Dorothy said, still looking shocked. He earned every year of it, Helen replied firmly. Patricia turned to me. If you hadn't had the courage to expose him and see it through to trial, the rest of us would still be suffering in silence. Thank you. We did this together, I said. Every one of you who came forward made the difference. Over the months that followed, the 5 of us became friends. We started meeting monthly for lunch, and those gatherings became something I looked forward to. We called ourselves the Survivors Club, though Helen joked we should call ourselves the Don't Mess with Old Ladies Club. We also started working with the local senior advocacy group to educate other older adults about financial fraud and elder abuse. I gave talks at community centers about recognizing warning signs and protecting yourself. The key thing to remember, I tell audiences, is that real love and care don't come with strings attached. If someone is helping you but also asking for access to your finances, your home, your personal information, that's a red flag. I'd share my story, and almost every time, at least one person would come up to me afterward and quietly confess they were experiencing something similar. Some had caregivers stealing from them. Others had family members exploiting them. A few had neighbors or new friends who'd become suspiciously interested in their assets. Each time, I'd help them connect with resources, lawyers, police, social services. I'd encourage them to trust their instincts and document everything. And I'd remind them that seeking help wasn't a sign of weakness but of strength. Leave me in the comments. Have you been through something similar? One evening, about a year after Daniel's sentencing was extended, Sophia and I were having dinner when she brought up something that had been on her mind. Mom, I've been thinking about what Daniel did. Not just to you, but to all those other women. And I realized something. When we were married, he used to volunteer at the senior center. He told me he was helping organize activities, but now I wonder if he was actually scouting for victims. The thought made my skin crawl. Did he mention anyone specifically? There were a few women he talked about. Said they were lonely, needed help with things. I thought he was being kind. Her voice broke. I was so naive. You weren't naive. You trusted your husband. That's what marriage is supposed to be about. But I should have seen the signs. The expensive lifestyle we couldn't afford. The way he was always asking about your finances. The time I found cash in his jacket pocket and he said it was a bonus, but it seemed like a strange amount, $340 exactly. Sophia, you can't blame yourself for his crimes. I know, but I feel responsible. What if I'd paid more attention? What if I'd questioned things more? Maybe I could have stopped him before he hurt so many people. I reached across the table and took her hand. Or maybe he would have manipulated you more, made you complicit without your knowledge. You did the right thing when you found out the truth. You stood with me. You testified against him. You divorced him. That took courage. She squeezed my hand. I learned that courage from you. My daughter's healing process was slower than mine in some ways. She'd loved Daniel, planned a future with him. Learning that her entire marriage had been built on lies and manipulation had shaken her faith in her own judgment. She'd started dating again but was cautious, almost fearful. I'm afraid I'll miss the signs again, she admitted. What if I attract another Daniel? You won't. Because now you know what to look for. And you know to trust your instincts. If something feels off, it probably is. How did you know? With Daniel. I mean, what made you suspicious? I thought about it carefully. Honestly, at first it was just small things that didn't add up. The way things moved in my house when I knew I hadn't touched them. The lifestyle changes you couldn't quite explain. But the real moment was when I looked in his eyes after my jewelry went missing. There was something cold there, something calculating. He was performing concern, not feeling it. I never saw that side of him. Because he didn't show it to you.